to your investment style from the sectors that you were talking about. And at this point, let me ask you, because I mean, a lot of stocks that you own and you talk about are almost like evergreen stories. And you cited some examples and told us why. So when do you decide on selling a position, a stock?
So there's two aspects to this, right? One is position sizing. So हमारा position sizing होता है basis the longevity of the comparative advantage. So longevity हम कैसे measure करते हैं? तीन चीजें देखते हैं longevity assess करने के लिए. पहला हम देखते हैं whether the company has, as I said, pricing power, right? So let's call it in simple terms, the pricing power aspect. Let's call it the moat of the company, right? Which again, if you want to think about it intuitively, is the price premium that the company enjoys, right? Is the company selling at a 10% price premium, 20%, 30%, 40%? So पहला काम है मोट को क्वांटिफाई करो, बाजार में जाओ, डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर से बात करो, डीलर से बात करो, दर्जनों डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर डीलर से बात करके मोट को क्वांटिफाई करो. I'm just going to do a little bit of projection, just to sort of explain this more intuitively, right? So step one है मोट को क्वांटिफाई करो. Don't sit in the office and be a desktop intellectual, right? काफी हमारे प्रोफेशन में desktop intellectual गिरी की काफी एक आदत है लोगों को, right? बाजार में जाके पता करो भैया कि एस्ट्रल पॉली का CPVC पाइप क्यों प्रीमियम में बिकता है, या एस्ट्रल पॉली का रेजिनोवा एडिसिव क्यों बॉम्बे के मार्केट में क्लीन अप कर रहा है, वजह क्या है, प्राइस प्रीमियम को क्वांटिफाई करो, राइट? सो आउट ऑफ 10 पॉइंट्स गिव अ स्कोर आउट ऑफ 10 ऑन मोड. Second thing is give a score on lethargy. By lethargy we mean the efforts, the initiatives taken by the management team to kill the competition and strengthen the franchise. Franchise को stronger बनाना है, competition को kill करना है. What are the initiatives being taken to help our analysts break this up? We have got 3 different types of research we ask them to do. पहला piece is look at the last 10 years of annual reports and quantify for us the extent to which working capital cycles have been reduced and asset turns have been improved, right? Company की efficiency, working capital, asset turns are measures of efficiency. इसको कैसे improve किया गया है? For example, अगर Asian Paints का working capital cycle 20 साल पहले 100 दिन था और आज 6 दिन है, how did it get from 100 to 6? Unless we understand the way it got from 100 to 6, we won't be able to understand the sustainability of that improvement, right? So step one, look at incremental deepening of moats. पूरा मेरे को quantification चाहिए, मेरे को हवाबाजी नहीं चाहिए. Our analysts know that our investment committee is focused on hard facts, not on हवा में तीर मारना. Second is we are still a very poor country, and therefore we look for companies who are constantly launching new products and services, right? We don't expect 100% success rate with new products and services, but हमको innovation engine तगड़ा चाहिए. So let's take Titan, right? In the last 10 years alone, they would have come up with their whole fast track range of accessories. They came up with their eyewear, which is now profitable. They came up with Taniera sarees, में जो हमारे अंदाजे से store level पे profitable है. They acquired Carrot Lane, a digital franchise, and they made it fabulously profitable, right? So at Titan, we'll get high marks basis constant endeavor to innovate and experiment, right? And for bonus points, show us companies. We tell our research team, show us companies which are willing to blow up themselves. ये बहुत hard है. Anywhere in the world, it's very difficult to find successful companies which are willing to disrupt themselves, right? So if you see what Bajaj Finance is doing with the 123 app, effectively Bajaj Finance is disrupting itself. What Titan has done with Carrot Lane is disrupt itself. Only the classiest management teams has the dum to put hundreds of millions of dollars to work in disrupting itself. So again on lethargy, we score lethargy on 10, right? We score lethargy on 10. And finally, we go to succession planning, right? This is, we don't live in America, we live in India. हमारा free market केवल 20-25 साल पुराना है. The pool of executives who are of the quality of Aditya Puri is no more than 100 strong. And therefore, if we go and tell Yes Bank clients कि हमको लगता है कि अगला 20 साल Titan में पैसा बनेगा, naturally Yes Bank clients will say, boss तुमको पता कैसे है 10 साल बाद चलाएगा कौन Titan, right? How do you know what is the strength of Titan's bench, right? Next generation है. So to assess the strength of the management team 10 years hence, 15 years hence, we look at succession planning very carefully. इसको भी 10 points दिए जाते हैं, right? And to understand that, we break it up into 4 parts. Firstly, is we meet the functional heads. And we understand the degree of decentralization, right? So is the functional head a kind of Malik ka Naukar who jumps up when the Malik says, this is what you're going to do today? Or does the functional head enjoy a great deal of autonomy? Jitna zyada autonomy, utna high chance that the zonal heads and the functional heads will rise and become high quality CEOs in due course. Right? Degree of autonomy बहुत जरूरी है. Second is we look at the last 10 years of annual reports and look at how quickly the boardroom churns. In typical mediocre companies in our country, boardroom will churn every 3 years. In high-class franchises, the boardroom will churn once a decade. A TCS, an Asian Paints, a Pidilite, आप देखोगे 10 साल में एक बार boardroom churn करेगा, right? So boardroom churn is a very good measure of quality of succession planning. तीसरा, जब boardroom churn करता है, where do the replacements come from? If a headhunter is brought in, negative marks, right? Which means आपका internal pipeline कमजोर था, आपको बाहर से लोग लाने पड़े, right? You don't have a pipeline which hires from good business schools, grooms and mentors people through their 30s and turns them into CEOs at 45. अब बाहर से लोग लाते हो, negative marks. And चौथा, where we have an unfair advantage, I have to confess, is independence of board of directors. The people who run the country are Marcellus' clients. So typically हमको most boards में most independent directors के ऊपर एक बहुत अच्छा clarity होता है. Is this person really an independent director, or is he a golf club buddy of the promoter? Right, who basically puts a thappa on whatever the Malik asks him to put a thappa on, right? So we give high marks for genuinely independent boards, right? So 10 maximum score is 10 for Moat, 10 for lethargy, 10 for succession planning, right? Typical franchise that we invest in will get 20 marks out of 30. Champion franchise, say a Titan or an Asian Paints, will push 25, 26, right? This score, this longevity score, we call it the longevity score, this drives position sizing and the buy sell decision. जब ये score उल्टा जाता है, right? The company becomes lethargic, right? Malik puts his son or daughter, Malik elevates his son or daughter to the boardroom without any due justification. When the company starts hoarding capital, that's when the score starts dropping. If the score drops enough, it'll end up getting thrown out of the portfolio. So typical year में एक बार we will go through this episode once a year, where the score will drop so sharply that the stock will end up going out. So for example, इस year का जो only exit in our portfolio this year, and typical year में out of 15 stocks, one stock ends up going out. This year's exit was Abbott, where as many of you will know, they effectively gave up their dominant position in a critical drug called Dufastone. They gave it up to Mankind. They saw it coming, they didn't respond in our view, and therefore to our mind that the Moat score therefore fell from 6 to 5. In parallel, and these are obviously related, in the space of 5 years they've had 3 MDs, right? In the space of 5 years they had 3 MDs, so the succession score fell, and finally they announced that विदेश से Abbott के US stable से कोई नए products आएंगे नहीं, so the lethargy score fell, and therefore the overall score fell. Once you fall to 15, even 16, you might just make it to the portfolio. 15 पे तो आपका निकलने का बारी आ जाएगा. So that's how stocks end up going out, right? So that's the first thing, is to get across that we don't sort of wake up in the morning and say आज Abbott बेचना है या Divi's खरीदना है. A lot of this work is driven by analysts. The analysts control these scores. If the scores drop, then the stock ends up getting either reduced in position or it ends up going out. And the other aspect is changing the size of the position. Right, the position size can change due to 2 reasons. Right, पहला reason it can change is the scores drop, but the other reason it can change is if the stock price drops. For example, if the stock price गिर गई, but the scores remain unchanged, stock price गिर गई, then we increase the position size. Right, so the longevity framework tells us the ideal position size for that stock. So for example, let's take an example. Basis the scores, Bajaj Finance should be roughly 9% of the portfolio. So 1st Jan 2020, Bajaj was 9% of the portfolio. Then in the next 120 days, Jan through to April 2020, Bajaj Finance fell, I think around 60%, Amar, if my memory is serving right. Right? सबने बोला बॉस खत्म है, बेच दो. We couldn't see any reason, कुछ ना तो कुछ खत्म लगा, ना तो कुछ बेचने की वजह लगी. But because the stock fell 60%, 9 का 3 हो गया. 9% position became 3%, right? So we did some more work in April 2020. Tej, our financials analyst, did a bunch of work, very detailed work, and we said, "Ye scores to banta hai. The scores don't change. The moat, the longevity, the succession planning on Bajaj stays as good as it was on 1st Jan 2020." So since the score, the warranted position was 9, but the stock had corrected and the position had become 3, we told our trader, "Isko triple kar do." So early May 2020 हमारे हेड ट्रेडर अनिल को हमने बोला कि बजाज फाइनेंस को आप ट्रिपल कर दो. So he asked us क्या बेचूं, because to triple the position from 3 से 9 मेरे को कुछ बेचना तो है. So we asked him कोविड के पैनिक में क्या चला है, and as you would expect he said Nestle खूब चला है और Abbott खूब चला है. So we realized that Nestle and Abbott had gone north of their warranted positions. तो वहां से हमने पैसे निकाले. We still had substantial Nestle Abbott मिला के 9% था जैन में, वो 15 हो गया था. 15 को फिर से 9 कर दिया and बजाज का 3 से ट्रिपल करके 9 कर दिया. In the subsequent 2 years, Bajaj Finance tripled. You would have still made money had we not tripled the position, but we would have made less money.
Yeah.
So to our mind, investing involves 2 skills. One is you have to get a grip on the intrinsic value of the franchise or a position size. And second is when the market either gets excited and pumps the stock up or gets depressed and pumps it down, you've got to be vigilant and ramp massively. So first 6 months of 2022, Dr. Lal Path Lab halved. In June, July, we doubled the position. Right? Last 12 months, Divi's Lab fell by a third. Last month or so, we've sharply increased the Divi's Lab position. Right? Most लोगों से ये होता नहीं है because उनको डर लगता है. They use the stock price as some sort of measure of the company's quality. The stock price actually has zero signaling value.
This is almost like value averaging.
Call it value averaging or call it having a very keen sense of what is the intrinsic value of the franchise. If the market says ये बहुत ज़्यादा है, तो पैसा ले लो, profits ले लो. अगर market गलती से बोले बहुत कम है, then build an even bigger position, right? But don't listen to the market. The market is not efficient. The market has zero idea what is the real value of a Divi's Lab. The market honestly has no idea what Divi's Lab value is, or HDFC Bank's value is, or Bajaj Finance is. And therefore, if you say market efficient है, तो फिर तो point ही नहीं ना investing का. फिर आप जाके कुछ और करो. Government G-Sec खरीद के net of tax 4% कमाओ.